Last night, viewers witnessed an unprecedented clash when Robert Downey Jr.'s promotional appearance on The Late Show spiraled into chaos. What began as standard late-night banter quickly deteriorated as host Stephen Colbert crossed line after line, leading to a heated exchange that left the audience in stunned silence and the acclaimed actor visibly furious before storming off set. The tension was palpable from the moment Robert Downey Jr. walked onto the stage. The usual enthusiastic applause greeted the Marvel icon as he approached the desk, dressed impeccably in a navy-tailored suit. Colbert's smile seemed forced as they exchanged the customary handshake, a subtle indication of the storm brewing beneath the surface of late-night pleasantries. "So, Robert, or should I say the artist formerly known as Iron Man," Colbert began, his tone carrying an edge that immediately set an uncomfortable atmosphere. "Welcome back to the show. I see your career is still coasting on that decade-old superhero role." The audience's nervous laughter quickly faded as Downey's smile tightened. He adjusted his position slightly, maintaining his composure as he responded, "Always great to be here, Stephen. Though I'm actually here to talk about my new environmental foundation that's launching next week." Right, Colbert cut in, flipping through his note cards with exaggerated disinterest. "Another celebrity charity. Because what the world really needs is another millionaire telling us how to save the planet while flying private jets." The camera caught Downey's eyebrows rising slightly, the first genuine reaction breaking through his professional veneer. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats as the hostile tone became impossible to ignore. "Actually, we've partnered with leading climate scientists and are fully carbon neutral in all our operations," Downey replied evenly, though his voice had lowered an octave. "We're focusing on accessible green technology for developing communities." "Fascinating," Colbert interrupted again, making a show of stifling a yawn. "Almost as fascinating as your Oscar snub last year. Tell me, does it sting knowing you've been nominated twice but never won? All those Marvel movies, and somehow you're still chasing that golden statue?" The audience gasped audibly. This departure from the typically playful late-night banter had crossed into territory that felt deliberately provocative. The camera panned to Downey, who sat completely still for a moment, his expression unreadable behind his tinted glasses. "You know what, Stephen," he finally said, removing his glasses and looking directly at the host. "I'm getting the sense that you've got something you want to say to me. Why don't we just cut to it?" Colbert leaned forward, abandoning any pretense of the friendly late-night format. "Fine. Let's talk about how you've managed to rebrand yourself as this wholesome family man and environmental crusader when some of us remember your less-than-stellar past. Second chances are great for Hollywood royalty, aren't they?" The studio fell completely silent. Even the production crew could be seen exchanging concerned glances off-camera. Downey's well-documented struggles with addiction and his remarkable comeback were considered off-limits in interviews, an unspoken rule in the industry given his decades of sobriety and charitable work. "Wow," Downey said quietly, nodding slowly. 20 years of sobriety, and you think that's appropriate interview material? I'm curious. Did your producers approve this line of questioning, or is this some personal vendetta I wasn't aware of?" Colbert adjusted his tie, seemingly emboldened rather than chastened. "Just doing my job, Robert. Not every interview can be the softball press junkets you're used to. The public deserves authenticity, don't you think?" "Authenticity?" Downey repeated, a hint of disbelief in his voice. "Let's talk about authenticity then. Like how your entire comedic persona is built on this holier-than-thou political commentary that somehow never manages to punch up instead of down, or how your ratings have been in free fall for the past season, which might explain this desperate attempt at generating controversy." The audience's reaction was mixed. Some gasped, others applauded Downey's pushback. Colbert's face flushed visibly as the camera captured his reaction. "We'll be right back after these messages," he said abruptly, signaling for a commercial break. The red light on the camera blinked off, but the microphones hadn't yet been cut. "What the hell was that?" Downey could be heard saying as the show cut to commercial, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent studio. When the broadcast resumed, the tension had escalated visibly. Colbert's collar was slightly askew, and Downey had moved to the edge of his seat, his body language suggesting he was ready to leave at any moment. "Before the break, we were having a spirited discussion with Robert Downey Jr., Colbert said to the camera, attempting to regain control of the interview. "Let's lighten things up with a game I like to call Marvel Secrets Revealed." The audience watched in confusion as Colbert produced a stack of cards. "I've collected some interesting rumors from the Marvel sets over the years. All you have to do is tell us if they're true or false." Downey's expression darkened. "I'm not playing this game, Stephen." "Oh, come on, it'll be fun," Colbert insisted, already reading from the first card. "True or false, you demanded a higher salary than any of your Avengers co-stars and threatened to walk if they didn't pay you per minute of screen time?" "That's completely false, and frankly, insulting to the entire cast," Downey replied, his patience visibly wearing thin. "Those negotiations are private, and I've always advocated for fair compensation for everyone involved in those projects." Colbert smirked, moving to the next card. "Sources claim you had a clause in your contract that you wouldn't share dressing rooms with certain co-stars. Care to name names?" The camera caught Downey taking a deep breath, his jaw tensing as he glanced toward the wings of the stage where a publicist could be seen making cutting motions with her hand. "You know what?" Downey said, calmly removing his microphone. "I think we're done here." "Running away from tough questions, Robert?" Colbert taunted as Downey stood up. "I thought Iron Man was supposed to be a hero." Downey paused mid-stride, his back to the audience. The studio had gone completely silent, the kind of quiet that feels like a physical presence. Slowly, deliberately, he turned back toward Colbert, whose smug expression faltered slightly at the intensity in the actor's eyes. "That's exactly the problem with you, Stephen," Downey said, his voice low but carrying across the hushed studio. "You confuse heroism with tolerating disrespect. Let me make something very clear. I'm not here to be your punching bag for ratings." He walked back toward the desk, not sitting down but standing directly across from Colbert, who unconsciously leaned back in his chair. "You want to talk about tough questions?" Downey continued, resting his knuckles on the desk and leaning forward. "Let's talk about why a host who built his career on supposedly speaking truth to power spends his time trying to humiliate guests instead of actually addressing the issues they came to discuss." The audience erupted in scattered applause, which quickly grew until it filled the studio. Colbert's face flushed deeper as he reached for his blue mug, finding it empty. A production assistant rushed forward with water, nearly spilling it in. Her haste. "Look, Robert," Colbert said after taking a sip, his voice strained with forced casualness. "This is just how we do things here. It's all in good fun. The audience expects a certain edge." "Don't hide behind your audience," Downey cut in. "They didn't write those questions. They didn't decide to dredge up 20-year-old struggles instead of discussing a foundation that could genuinely help people. That was all you." Colbert's eyes narrowed. "So you only want softball questions? Only want to be asked about what you're promoting? That's not journalism." "This isn't journalism," Downey fired back, gesturing around the studio. "This is entertainment. And there's a fine line between asking challenging questions and being deliberately cruel for shock value. You crossed that line the moment you decided to use my past struggles with addiction as some kind of gotcha moment." The tension in the studio was electric. Camera operators exchanged glances, and in the wings, producers were huddled in urgent conversation. One frantically signaled to cut to commercial, but Colbert waved them off. "The public has a right to know who they're really looking up to," Colbert insisted, doubling down despite the clear discomfort of everyone in the room. "Your carefully crafted image." "My carefully crafted image?" Downey let out a short, incredulous laugh. "My life has played out in public since I was a teenager. Every failure, every mistake, every struggle, all of it documented, discussed, dissected. I've never hidden who I am or where I've been." He straightened up, taking a step back from the desk. "But here's what you don't understand, Stephen. People can change. They can grow. They can take their darkest moments and use them as fuel to do better, to be better. My foundation isn't some PR stunt. It's the result of years of wanting to give back, to create something meaningful." Colbert opened his mouth to respond, but Downey wasn't finished. "And you know what the real irony is? Your show used to stand for something. You used to challenge the powerful, speak truth about important issues. Now you're just another talk show host chasing viral moments at the expense of your guest's dignity." The audience's reaction was split, half cheering Downey's candor, half shocked at the public dressing down of their host. Colbert's expression had hardened into something cold and defensive. "That's rich coming from someone who made millions, playing a weapons manufacturer turned superhero," Colbert retorted, abandoning any pretense of civility. "How much of your fortune came from glorifying war before your character had his convenient change of heart? Talk about manufactured growth." A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Downey's publicist had now moved to the edge of the stage, clearly ready to intervene, but he held up a hand to stop her. "Are you really equating a fictional character's arc with my actual life?" Downey asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "That's the level of discourse we've sunk to? Or is this because I turned down your film last year?" The last question landed, like a bombshell. Colbert froze, his expression confirming what many in the industry had only whispered about. The late-night host had been trying to break into feature film directing, and apparently had approached Downey for a project. "This isn't about," Colbert stammered, thrown off script for the first time in the interview. "It is about that, isn't it?" Downey pressed, suddenly understanding the hostility. "This whole ambush was because I passed on your screenplay. I told my agent to let you down gently, explain that the timing wasn't right with my foundation launching, but instead of taking it professionally, you decided to use your platform for, what? Revenge? Humiliation?" The audience was completely riveted now, witnessing what felt like the most authentic moment ever broadcast on late-night television. The fourth wall had not just been broken, it had been obliterated. "That's absurd," Colbert finally managed, attempting to regain his footing. "We're getting off track. Let's get back to your—" "My publicist warned me, you know," Downey continued, ignoring Colbert's attempt to change the subject. "She said you'd been making unusual requests for this interview, asking for topics that were explicitly off-limits. In our agreement, she advised me to cancel. I didn't because I genuinely thought you were better than this. I thought our history, 15 years of interviews, fundraisers together, even that dinner at my house after your mother passed, meant something." The personal revelation silenced Colbert momentarily. The audience could sense they were witnessing something raw and unplanned. "Robert, let's just—" "No, let's not," Downey said firmly. "Let's not pretend this is normal interview behavior. Let's not act like blindsiding guests with personal attacks is acceptable." The producers were now openly signaling for a commercial break, and this time Colbert nodded slightly in agreement, clearly wanting an escape from the corner he'd backed himself into. "We'll be right back after these messages," Colbert announced, his voice strained as he forced a smile toward the camera. The red light blinked off, but unlike before, the studio microphones were immediately cut. The audience watched in tense silence as Colbert and Downey continued their heated exchange off-mic. The host's face grew increasingly flushed, while Downey maintained the same intense, controlled demeanor. Production assistants hovered anxiously nearby, and the show's executive producer hurried onto the stage, inserting himself between the two men. When the cameras prepared to roll again 3 minutes later, the energy in the studio had shifted dramatically. Downey had moved from the guest chair to the far end of the desk, refusing to sit close to Colbert. The host's tie was loosened, and he appeared to be sweating under the studio lights. "Welcome back to The Late Show," Colbert began as the red light came on, his voice lacking its usual confidence. "Before the break, we were having a candid conversation with Robert Downey Jr." "Candid is one word for it," Downey interjected, causing another ripple of uncomfortable laughter through the audience. The executive producer stood just off camera, making a wrap-it-up gesture. It was clear the remainder of the planned interview was being abandoned. "I think," Colbert started, but Downey raised his hand. "If you don't mind, I'd like to speak directly to your audience for a moment," Downey said, turning to face the camera. The director, sensing television gold despite the chaos, switched to a close-up of the actor. "What happened here tonight isn't what any of us expected," Downey said, his voice steady and measured. "I came to discuss an environmental foundation that's been years in the making, a project dedicated to bringing sustainable technology to communities most affected by climate change. Instead, this turned into whatever this was." He gestured between himself and Colbert, who was staring down at his desk notes, jaw clenched. "But there's something important here that shouldn't be lost in the drama," Downey continued. "In our industry, in any industry really, respect matters. Professional boundaries matter. The way we treat each other matters." The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. "I've made my share of mistakes. More than my share, if we're being honest. And I've faced the consequences of those mistakes publicly, painfully, repeatedly. What I haven't done is use those experiences as weapons against others. I haven't used my platform to tear people down for ratings or vendettas." Colbert finally looked up, something shifting in his expression. "This isn't about avoiding tough questions," Downey emphasized. "It's about the difference between journalism and cruelty, between entertainment and exploitation. It's about remembering that behind every public persona is a human being." The speech was clearly resonating with the audience, who began to applaud, slowly at first, then building. Even some of the crew members were nodding in agreement. Colbert raised his hand slightly, asking for a chance to speak. The applause died down as Downey nodded, giving him the floor. "I owe you an apology, Robert," Colbert said, his voice quiet but picked up clearly by the microphones. "You're right. This wasn't about tough questions or honest journalism. This was personal, and I crossed a line I shouldn't have crossed." The admission hung in the air, surprising everyone in the studio. Downey's expression remained neutral, waiting. "The screenplay rejection hit harder than I expected," Colbert continued, his usual performative tone absent. "I've spent decades building this career, this persona, and I thought branching into film directing would be, I don't know, a natural evolution. When you passed, it felt like validation of my biggest fear, that I'll never be more than this." He gestured around the studio. "So you decided to publicly humiliate me?" Downey asked, not letting him off the hook despite the vulnerability. "I told myself it was just good television," Colbert admitted. "Hard-hitting interviews get attention. But you're right. There's a line between challenging and cruel. I crossed it, and I'm sorry." The audience seemed stunned by this unexpected turn toward authenticity. Even Downey appeared taken aback by the candor. "I appreciate that," he said after a moment. "And for what it's worth, I didn't pass on your screenplay because I didn't think you had talent. The timing genuinely wasn't right with the foundation launch." Colbert nodded, accepting this, but clearly still processing everything that had transpired. "Would you tell us about the foundation, in the time we have left?" Downey studied him for a moment, weighing the sincerity of the offer. Then he nodded, moving back to the guest chair. "The Footprint Initiative is focused on practical solutions," he began, his passion for the project evident immediately. "We're developing affordable clean water technology for communities on the front lines of climate change. For the next 4 minutes, Colbert listened without interrupting as Downey outlined the Foundation's goals, genuine interest replacing the earlier hostility. The audience seemed relieved by the reset, though the tension of the previous confrontation still lingered in the air. As the segment drew to a close, Colbert extended his hand across the desk. "I hope you'll consider coming back someday. Maybe we can do this the right way next time." Downey hesitated before accepting the handshake. "We'll see." The cameras cut away as the show's band began to play. Once off air, Downey immediately stood and removed his microphone. He exchanged a few words with Colbert that the audience couldn't hear, then walked off the stage without looking back. Backstage, his publicist was already on the phone, fielding calls from every major entertainment outlet. Video clips of the confrontation were already circulating online, hashtags trending, think pieces being written in real time. "Are you okay?" she asked, covering the phone's microphone. "I'm fine," Downey replied, surprisingly calm given what had just transpired. Sometimes these things need to happen. By morning, the interview had been viewed millions of times across platforms. The discourse had split into predictable camps. Those applauding Downey for standing his ground, those defending Colbert's right to ask tough questions, and the majority in the middle who recognized a rare moment of genuine human interaction, breaking through the polished veneer of late-night television. 3 days later, The Late Show's ratings hit a 5-year low as viewers and celebrities alike expressed their discomfort with Colbert's tactics. Several scheduled guests canceled their appearances, citing scheduling conflicts that fooled no one. Downey's Foundation launch, meanwhile, received unprecedented coverage. Donations poured in, and the environmental initiatives gained traction, far beyond what any normal publicity tour could have achieved. 2 weeks after the confrontation, a handwritten note arrived at Downey's production office. Inside was a brief message in Colbert's distinctive handwriting. "You were right. I lost sight of what matters. The Foundation is doing important work. If you ever need a platform again, no ambushes this time. I promise." Downey read the note twice before slipping it into his desk drawer without response. Some bridges could be rebuilt, but others served as necessary reminders of boundaries that should never have been crossed in the first place.